Good Saturday evening, everyone. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee here as we get this live stream on this Saturday, October the 20th, 2018 underway. I'm going to try something a little different. So for those of you who are on the Patreon platform, I turned the chat live on with this live stream post. So I'm going to see if I can have your chat open up and the chat on YouTube up at the same time. So I've got my fingers crossed that this is going to work. And we'll, of course, be addressing both sides of the chat board, the YouTube chat board. Good evening, everybody that's on tonight. And we'll also be also watching the chat side on the Patreon board at the same time. So for those of you who are interested, the Patreon platform offers a lot more than just the live streams. So there are exclusive live streams that we're doing just for Patreon members. This one is open to everyone, and also we have posts from my website that show up with no ads, and also posts that aren't up on the website that are exclusive to Patreon members. Plus, you get to message me if need be. If you've got some questions or comments or suggestions, ideas, or whatever it is, you can reach me and I'll respond to you in a timely manner. It starts at $2 a month, and it's a great way to support what I'm doing here on the internet and on YouTube and in all the other places that I'm at: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So do consider becoming a Patreon member. And I put a link up on the chat, and I'll put a link up again a little bit later on. We have a lot of weather going on in the long term. In the short term, there really isn't too much happening across the U.S. We also have some interesting weather developing in Western Europe with the changes that are underway in the atmosphere. We've been talking about a blocky pattern developing, and I'm going to touch on a few issues tonight, including teleconnections and the indices, because I want to make clear what they mean and what they don't mean. A lot of times these teleconnections, I think, are a bit misunderstood and a bit misused in that the connections, the indices will signal a storm, but there's a lot of ifs with that, and we will get into all of that going forward. But first off, as far as tonight is concerned, John Curry tonight pointing out you've had some rumbles of thunder in central Pennsylvania, and I can see why with what's on the radar, which we'll get to in a second. But first off, why don't we take a look at what's happening watches and warnings wise? We really don't have a whole lot from the standpoint of flood watches or severe weather, or I guess we're getting to the time of year where we're going to have to start talking about winter storm and winter weather advisories. We've already seen that happen, but much of this is a result of the shots of cold air that continue to come into the eastern part of the United States. And it is going to be accompanied by some wind, and that's why where you see the brownish shading across Illinois and Indiana, Ohio, down into western Virginia, a small portion of western Maryland and southwest PA, and even a little bit of a patchy area there in central South Carolina. We've got wind advisories, also some wind advisories up on the map in eastern Maryland on the Delmarva Peninsula and in Delaware Bay, because in Chesapeake Bay, in this type of situation, when you get those strong northwesterlies, they tend to drain down in those open waters there, and you wind up getting the wind exaggerated a bit. So we could see some wind gusts out of this in excess of 30 to maybe 40 miles an hour. And the purple shading that was out over the coastal waters, we were looking at gale warnings that are up. And this is going to make for a very chilly Sunday in that we are going to see the winds on Sunday with those gusts up into the 30s and temperatures that will be hard pressed to get out of the 40s, probably makes it feel like it's a day more like in late November than middle to late October, with the temperatures with the wind chills down in the 30s. Right now, in terms of the actual temperatures, we had one of those, as I've been referring to them, as subpar warm-ups, and we're seeing the evening temperatures here. We made it only up into the low 60s. A lot of forecasters were kind of pushing the envelope a bit higher, but it took a little longer for the clouds to get out of the way. And that, as a result, kept the temperatures down just a little bit. But they still made it to the low 60s. And now, of course, we've dropped off from these levels. We've got some readings down in the low 50s and upper 40s. And as we move our way up into western Pennsylvania and through parts of upstate New York, temperatures are mostly in the upper 30s to middle 40s. And going further west into Ohio, we're seeing temperatures mostly in the 40s. Going to give it a second to populate here, but we've got a lot of 30s throughout much of Indiana and on up into the state of Michigan, and then back over into Chicagoland. At the moment, we've got temperatures that are running in the upper 30s and lower 40s. So this is the beginnings of this cold shot of air that's coming down from the north with readings that going to hit their bottom in the east Sunday night into Monday morning. The core of this cold air moves through fairly quickly, and then we're going to start another one of these subpar warm-ups again as we move into Tuesday. Just let me really quick. I'm going to just want to open up the chat board on the side here so I can have so I can see what you guys are saying and have the maps up going at the same time. So now that I've done that, we can progress. Now, as I said, a lot of the indicators are setting up. I mean, when we look at these teleconnections, and here's two of them, the Pacific North America Index and the North Atlantic Oscillation. Let me just point out that these indices are derived from the weather models themselves. They are not separate from the models. This one is off the GFS ensembles, and as a result, you get the GFS forecasting whatever it is that it's forecasting, and then the PNA and the NAO and the EPO, the East Pacific Oscillation, that's all calculated off the pressure changes that are showing up on the GFS. So it's kind of the GFS is the chicken, the indices are the egg. So as the weather models change from day to day, the pressure patterns that the weather models forecast are going to be different. So that's why you see variations in these signals from day to day. I've noticed, for example, the Pacific North America Index, and this was done off last night's weather model run, is stronger than it was being shown yesterday. Those indice readings go up to 300, and that tells us that the ridge in the west, at least through the middle part of next week, is stronger than what's been modeled. Now, we do see a downtrend in the PNA a bit, but it still remains positive down at that 100 level as we go into the end of the month and the very beginning of the month of November. So when we look at these things and with regards to storm signals for the eastern part of the United States, a positive PNA and a strongly positive PNA is very bullish for the possibility of the storm in the east. But when it's downtrending, it's telling you that that ridge in the west is weakening. So that could have an impact on a storm. That is going to have an impact on the strength of any kind of storm system in the eastern part of the United States. What the teleconnections don't tell us, they don't tell us where that storm is going to be. They don't tell us where the troughs are going to set up. Do they set up near the East Coast? Do they set up near 80 degrees west? Do they set up closer to 85 or 90 degrees west? Because that makes a huge difference in terms of where these lows are going to track. The other important index at play is that North Atlantic oscillation, which is crashing strongly positive today. It goes neutral by Monday, and then it goes slightly negative, not strongly negative, but slightly negative uh, beyond Monday and through all of next week, and stays at those levels until at the very end when it starts to creep up toward the neutral line. And what'll happen is when these get redone once a day, so when the 0Z run comes out tonight, we'll get a whole new set of PNA and NAO readings, and also the East Pacific oscillation, which I'm not really looking at here at this point. The EPO, I think, to me, the EPO, I think, is a really, really good indicator with regards to cold weather in the wintertime. So it'll get more attention from me when we are looking at the potential for snow and cold in the longer range. And right now, we're not really, really at that place. One of the things that's interesting in all of this, and my buddy in England, Jason SEO Smith, who's on my Facebook page, called attention in all of this, and my buddy in England, Jason SEO Smith, who's on my Facebook page. Okay, I had a simultaneous video of the live stream running. So Jason pointing out to me, because I really didn't look, but all these big changes that are going on having an impact on the weather in Europe. So I thought we'd take a look at that first. And you can see here on the upper air, the jet stream showing basically a warmer pattern across Europe for the last couple of days. And of course, this big upper high that built in this weekend. You've got a storm system that's dropping down across parts of Poland, and then drops southward into the Adriatic and over into Italy, and eventually down in the Mediterranean. But while we're watching this upper high in the North Atlantic, north of the Azores building, it is also going to be building east of England and Ireland, and you can see it here. And one of the things that happens in the long term is this really strong northerly flow from the Arctic regions into Eastern Europe and Siberia, with a rather wrapped up strong upper air system to reflect that. Now, that is going to bring some colder air into that part of Europe and into Asia, which of course is going to be important with regards to Siberian snow cover growth. But as we go into next weekend, that trough fires up a second time and brings a shortwave trough down through England and Ireland. You can see it here swinging from Greenland and Iceland on southeastward. And this opens up the possibility that there could be some early snows in parts of Western Europe next weekend. And in fact, if you can see on the far left is the easternmost edge of the upper high there, and that is setting up that railroad track essentially, with the freight train of cold air coming down from Greenland and the Arctic regions southeastward into Ireland and England, and also into Spain and France and Portugal, and through much of Western Europe. And that trough really digs down next Sunday. That's a very strong northerly flow aloft, and that's going to be reflected, by the way, on the surface, which you will switch over to now, and you'll see. Of course, remember, we're at the where we are in the calendar here. We're not in January or December or even the latter part of November. We're in the latter part of October. So it's not going to mean for a whole lot, but you are going to see some snow here being indicated in parts of northern Scotland, and even advancing southward, and even a little bit of patchy snow there showing up on the GFS in parts of Ireland. And eventually some of that snow gets down into some of in the mountains in northern Spain, southern France, and of course the Alps. And there you have a storm that develops in the Adriatic region, coming out of the Mediterranean, and that looks like it produces some substantial snows there in the Alps. Now, just a quick check of snowfall amounts, and again, remember the time of year, but a little bit of accumulating snow showing up in parts of northern Scotland. Very little, but it's still there, and at least we can familiarize ourselves with the upper air pattern that causes all this sort of thing. And you do have more significant snows showing up in those mountainous areas. Again, this is the time of year. It's late October. You can't expect too much to occur. And that's why you're only seeing some patchy stuff. But I figured I'd just put it up. Let me just bring that snow map back up again one more time. And by the way, a collective hello to everybody. Those of you who are on the YouTube chat, and so I see Stephen Briller and Stephen Franco are on the Patreon chat, which I have running at the same time. And Jason Schaefer, Thomas Eddy, you're all watching this from the Patreon platform. You actually can watch it from either side, um, again, I'm experimenting with this so that the Patreon members, when we set up the private live streams, I'll be able to use the chat at the same time. One of the things that we want to watch for in the next 10 days, of course, is we're coming to the end of that Siberian snow growth. There is a little bit of snow showing up in parts of northwestern Siberia. The snow growth on the western flank of the Siberian snow, the area that we watch in Eurasia has been a bit lacking, but we are seeing a little bit of it happening. A little more, of course, as you go further to the north. There's not a whole lot happening down in the southern flank. So when it comes to the end of the month, we'll take a look at the snow cover growth and evaluate it. And of course, we'll put this all together with respect to what Dr. Cohen, Judah Cohen, has been talking about. And we did a live stream with him back a couple of weeks ago. It's on the YouTube library, my YouTube library, if you want to go back and take a look at it. But let's come back now and take a look at the upper air across the Atlantic. One of the things that I think is really important for everybody to remember when we start evaluating these storm systems and the overall upper air pattern, I just want to remind you to what happened last year when we were dealing with this sort of situation where we've had this blocky pattern develop. And one of the things that happens, models, as the atmosphere gets stretched to extremes, the models tend to become very unstable. This is why, for those of you who might be model watching with regards to how the models are handling the weather situation along the East Coast for next weekend, that we've seen some really big jumps and swings back and forth in terms of how a storm is going to evolve, where it's going to wind up. Does it even have any impact of importance or not? One run, yes. Next run, no. Next run, somewhere in between. All of this has to really do with the fact that the models have a very difficult time when it comes to dealing with the strengths of these blocky patterns, these upper highs that try to build. And every run winds up having that blocky scenario differently, be it stronger or weaker, or further west or further east. And this makes a huge difference in how the model projects future events. And this is why we continue to have these big swings. And this is also why, as I've said many times, this is why you can't look at a model run 8 or 9 or 10 days in advance or longer and make plans from it, because there's going to be a normal amount of variability as it is. But when you're dealing with these stretched out indices in those teleconnections, when they're showing you some extreme things happening, it's going to be, every model run is going to handle things differently. I backed up the jet stream to Thursday when we had a shot of cold air. You can see that trough lifted out. We had our subpar warm up today in the east. Now here comes this next trough that is now swinging through the Great Lakes. It is producing some showers and even some rumbles of thunder, as we indicated earlier. That trough is on the coast Sunday morning. This is going to bring a shot of cold air that makes it, for this time of year, gets pretty far to the south. And notice that the flow, those railroad tracks, the lines that you see here, the height lines, go from the southeast coast northwestward into northwestern Canada. So the air going west to east, remember, counterclockwise around lows, clockwise around highs, So you're following a trough that's sitting near the Aleutians down to just north of Hawaii. Strong flow from there goes into northwest Canada, and then from northwest Canada dives into the southeastern coast of the United States. So our air is coming from snow-covered northwest Canada, which is which is on the cold side and cold enough where we're seeing temperatures that are going to run 15 or more degrees below their seasonal norms. This, at the same time, by the way, you do have a strong upper high just to the west of the Azores, and it's trying to build up toward northwestern Europe. That's where that, when you look at the upper right there, the high is kind of pointing in that direction. That's the ridge axis is just running up in that direction. The trough lifts out, and because that upper high is sitting here, now here it is now on Monday night, very strong there between the Azores and Iceland. It's locking the vortex, this complex vortex that we have in eastern Canada. So that means another trough rotates down and another shot of cold air comes in for the middle of next week. Now, after that, out in the North Atlantic, if you look in the upper right, you've got a cutoff low sitting south of the Azores and higher than normal pressures between the Azores to Greenland and to Iceland. This holds that trough just off the East Coast in check. In the meantime, we're starting to see energy, and we'll go back. In the meantime, energy from the Pacific is coming into the Southwest. And that's, if you look here on Tuesday night, where you see the area in the western part of the United States, that's a shortwave trough. So we have that moving in to the west. The ridge in the northwest is weakening a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. But it gradually comes back and strengthens again as we move toward the end of the week. Now, by Friday, that upper high between Greenland and the Azores is very strong, still in place. You're still holding that trough in the east, and it's trying to rotate around. And in the meantime, the energy in the southwest is coming in. But going into next weekend, and see, this is where you start to get, it gets problematic with respect to how the storm, how the pattern evolves in the eastern United States, because you still have that strong blocking high between the Azores and Greenland, and now you're timing out all these different short waves. And if you'll notice, from the plains to the East Coast, you'll notice that the lines aren't very smooth. There are several shortwave troughs embedded in here. And on top of that, you've got this big vortex in eastern Canada. Remember the gear analogy, the turning of the gears in the toddler's gearbox, the old toy, where you put all the gears in and then you turn one gear and all the gears turn. Remember, the gears here, they operate in the same way, except that they constantly are changing, and that changes the outcome. It's kind of like watching, it's like putting a jigsaw puzzle, working with a jigsaw puzzle in the world of Harry Potter. It is going to change as you you think you found the piece, and suddenly the piece will morph into a different shape. Here is the GFS's view for Saturday night. And I'm going to tell you right now, looking from the upper air, it's already different from the day run. You see this wrapped up little upper low that's sitting off the Virginia coast. And then you've got this other short wave and cutoff low in through Missouri. This is a very complex setup that we have here. And then that second trough sharpens up and then lifts up northeastward during the first part of the week of October 29th. That is, again, the change in how the models handle the block is going to change everything downstream. And in the longer term, you still have we lose that blocking high, and then it looks like something else is trying to evolve. The trough temporarily goes into the west, and we have a ridge off the east coast later in the forecast period. But that looks to be temporary, the way things are. It looks like we're transitioning a little bit again as we move into the first week of the month of November. Again, all bets are off because we, with respect to confidence, because we don't know yet whether this is how it's really going to look, or how much more is it going to change as we go forward. So the best we can really do here is just watch the evolutionary process of all of this. Now, back to the U.S., and we'll bring up the full continental U.S. map. And there we are. So here we are for Sunday morning. There's another secondary front here this evening that is running across western New York and extends back into southern Michigan, northern Ohio, and Indiana. There's actually going to be a little bit of a low that forms on the old cold front that moved offshore earlier today. And that's the reason why the models actually do generate some showers overnight, and even showing a little bit of snow there, probably some snow shower activity overnight in parts of northeastern Pennsylvania, and even up into the northern fringe of the precip line in the Hudson Valley and northwestern Massachusetts and southern Vermont, at least in the world of the GFS. Might be a bit overdone, but there is a low that develops there. You can see tomorrow afternoon there's a 994 low in the upper right, southeast of Cape Cod, and the pressure gradient is going to be relatively tight, with high pressure in Missouri and low pressure just to the southeast of Cape Cod tomorrow morning. So look for some pretty gusty winds here. I think we're going to see some gusts of 35 or 40 miles an hour before it's all said and done. The high builds in. Monday looks okay. We start a bit of a rebound. Then here comes the next cold front for Tuesday, which doesn't really have a whole lot of moisture with it. And in the meantime, we're starting to see moisture from a tropical system in the Pacific that moves inland into Mexico, and that rain gets into the southwest and into New Mexico and extends across the northern Gulf states, because we do have a bit of a frontal boundary that is going to be stalling across the Gulf. Next big high builds down, and that's going to keep things pretty chilly here Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday throughout much of the eastern part of the U.S., and particularly in the Northeast. I think it's going to be rather chilly. I'm thinking models might not be cold enough with this sort of a high like this and a northerly flow. Oftentimes, you get something like this in the depths, when you're deep into fall or in the wintertime, certainly, you could get some rather cold temperatures here. But for this time of year, it will be cold enough it's chilly enough that we can use the word cold. Now here comes the low. On Thursday, you've got a low that comes out of the Gulf and heads towards the southeast coast of the U.S. Remember, this is where we're starting to see that trough now swing around. And on this particular run, the GFS has come west with a surface low off the North Carolina coast next Saturday afternoon, and gets it fairly deep into the 970s. So it's got a pretty wrapped up storm here. We've gone back on this model run where it's timing out these short waves to produce a storm that is going to be closer to the coast. If you look at the prior run for the same time frame, it is much further to the south and east. It kept the timing of the shortwave troughs was different on that run. Again, I'm not going to say that the old run is correct, nor can I say with any confidence that the new run is correct. But those teleconnection indices do tell us that something is in play. Until we can work out the fine details in terms of the timing, we are still just going to be in speculative mode. That lifts up and out. By the way, it does produce a little bit of freezing precipitation on this run up in northern New England. The second shortwave trough comes out with more rain, and now we're into Tuesday and Wednesday. So we're going into Halloween with another 992 low off the Jersey coast. This one's closer to the coast. So it kind of has back-to-back possible nor'easters here on this run. Again, I'm not forecasting that. We're interpreting what the model runs are doing, and that's really all we can do at this point. And then after that moves out, and look at this, it even has a third system here toward the end of next week before we get a general breakdown of this blocky pattern. So it does get rather busy here with this blocky situation for the next week. Are we going to see 3 weather systems like this? Would be highly unusual. Although, think back to last March, who would have thought we would have had 4 in 2.5 weeks? But we don't know. Right now, we are still, I guess, as I said, in speculative mode when we're looking at the long term. Let's go to the short term. Because we do have some activity on the radar for those of us in the eastern part of the U.S., and we can take a look at what's going on the radar. And we do have some showers, and there might even be one or two heavier showers and a rumble or two of thunder with this, judging by some of these radar echoes. This is moving to the east, at least as of 7:32, as far as the weather going on in my neck of the woods from easternmost Pennsylvania to southern New England. It's quiet, but those showers are getting awfully close. Very interesting weather pattern. It's interesting to see this show up as early as it has in terms of the impressive nature of the blocking. And when you have temperatures that are running 15 degrees below average, that's a lot. Okay. In October, we see the outcome. We were talking about temperatures that are topping out in the 40s and 50s in the northern mid-Atlantic and in the Northeast. But take 15 degrees below normal and let's seasonally adjust that. Put it in a January air mass, for example, and now you're talking about teens and single digits and temperatures maybe even below zero in a lot of places. So time of year obviously matters greatly when you're looking at these weather patterns. I'm impressed at the kind of amplified nature of the upper pattern as a whole. Okay, so let's talk. Timothy Veltman would like to see a PNA forecast like that for the months of December through April with occasional flips to neutral. Don't forget, Timothy, last year we spent a good part of the winter and even those storms in March with a negative PNA, but the difference is that the PNA last year was so off the wall negative that I think that that was a huge factor. For storms in the east, a positive PNA works. But so does a strong negative PNA because it's telling you that the atmosphere is stretched all out of proportion. And of course, there were other things that were going on. We also had an off-the-wall North NAO index. The blocking last March was off-the-wall strong. So that, I think, probably became the bigger player as opposed to the PNA. Saying good evening to George Kasdan, who's on the Patreon chat side, along with Scott Briller and Stephen Franco and Jason Schaefer. So both chats are working, so I like that. Patricia Patrilak just poured in Larksville, Pennsylvania, low pressure and 47%. Bad for bones. I get it. You know, some people are weather sensitive when it comes to that sort of thing. Ryan Kong is thinking about trick-or-treating in Minnesota on Halloween, and at least from the standpoint of the longer range pattern, doesn't look like too much is going on in the northern plains. The GFS does actually have a chance for some rain showers in parts of Minnesota on Halloween day. I have to tell you, I'm a Halloween Grinch. Okay, when it comes to Halloween, I really kind of wish it would pour from start to finish because used to be the trick-or-treaters were a lot of them, and they used to get out of hand. Over the years, that's become less and less as a lot of the stuff has been more supervised. And it's also during the week, so it's a school night. Well, that's one of the other reasons why I don't like the fact that they moved daylight saving time for an extra week. I used to like it when the clocks went back on the last Sunday of October because that meant Halloween sunsets were at 5 o'clock in the evening, so they only had a limited kids only had a limited amount of time. It's not, you know what? It's not the little ones. The little ones are adorable, and I love seeing the little ones in their costumes. It's the teenagers, and they get a little rowdy sometimes, and it used to be, even sometimes they can get a bit more than rowdy. So that part of it, I didn't like. So that's my reasoning behind it, being the Halloween Grinch. Jason Schaefer looks to be based on this teleconnection that we'd expect the trough becoming broader right around storm time. That's correct. That is with the PNA decreasing a little bit, at least according to this last run now, and that's what we don't know. The PNA decreasing right at the time that the trough is getting ready to get its act together on the East Coast is telling you that the ridge in the West is not as strong, and therefore it's going to create difficulties for a storm system in the east to get organized, or maybe it winds up being further out. Pete Zahut, the Greenland block, that's the NAO. It's the same thing. Just to clarify, I see Chris Alley is on. Good to see you on, Chris. Robert Russo, Earl Warren, Seth Dominus, the regulars, Grayson Ward on there. Hello to you also. And yeah, Timothy, you like Halloween quiet. Last year, yeah, I remember when your dog was ill, you had to put the caution tape around. Yes, totally get it. I absolutely totally get it. All right. Oh, Delvin made it on tonight, so that's good. And Abedin Durakovic is on too. I haven't seen you in a while. Nice to see you. And LeBron fan is also on this evening. So some of the regulars, Lorenzo Rodriguez, welcome. We're going to get rain in Texas from the hurricane going into Mexico. Yes, it looks like some of that rain is going to spread eastward again. So I know you've had a rough time in parts of central and eastern Texas with the rains, the rains yesterday. I'm sorry, the rains over the last couple of weeks. But it looks like another round of rain is going to happen. You have that, and you have this frontal boundary that's stalled off in the Gulf. George Kasdan, you want me to stop the wind for a few hours so you can fish, but not tomorrow, buddy. It's going to blow a gale, especially in the morning. Probably you'll drop off late in the afternoon. Monday, I think, will be a bit better. Johnny Quest, with high winds tonight and wet ground, you could have a problem with down trees. Yes, you've got. That's why I think that's probably the reasoning behind the wind advisory too for your area, because in the Blue Ridge Mountains in Western Virginia, because of the fact that the saturated ground, the very soft ground, your trees are going to be highly vulnerable to gusts of wind that maybe normally wouldn't cause a problem. That's a very good point. Bobby Livingsworth, you think you'll see snow next month instead of December? I will say this: if we see this pattern extend itself, or even if it goes away, even if we get a change, a temporary change, if we wind up seeing this pattern again later in November and early December, I would suspect that we will see some early snows in some places in the Northeast and the northern Mid-Atlantic, away from coastal locations. The coastal locations, it's always extremely difficult. And that you have to have an absolutely perfect setup this time of year for it to happen, and the times that it has happened, and it hasn't been very often. I know everybody kind of points to these odd events, these very events like the October 11th, 12th storm, the October 29th storm of 2011. And if you go through the records, you go toward, say, from 20th of November on, there have been occasional instances where we've gotten accumulating snows along coastal areas, but those are rare. We could also go 10, 15 years without seeing an accumulating snow in coastal areas during the month of November. So that's why the average snowfall is only a little less than an inch for the month of November for places like New York City, and even less than that for Philadelphia, for example. A little more than that possibly for Boston, or certainly a little bit more than possibly for Albany. But the setups have to be perfect, and they just don't happen every year. I didn't get a chance to bass fish today, William. I was a little tired. So I wound up just taking it easy. Just trying to make sure I got everybody on the chat. Got all your questions. Moorseer Jr., old Brazilian. Not sure what that means, but you're new to the chat board, so welcome and thanks for being on board. And Tracy Turbin from Wisconsin is on. Nice to see you on. Welcome to the chat board, and welcome to my YouTube channel. And by the way, those of you who are on tonight for the first time, thanks for being here. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel so that you can get notifications when I do these live streams, which is every day, and of course doesn't cost you anything to subscribe to YouTube. A Halloween memory from Charles Baker got a lot of laughs when we hung a huge "We Give Green Stamps" banner at a funeral home. Nice. In the days when they used to have green stamps, if you could remember. Now of course, it would be gift cards. So you could probably do the same thing, but just do a gift card Halloween prank. Johnny pointing out, Johnny Quest, gigantic oak trees in his yard. If one of them comes down, we'll have a serious problem, to say the least. Well, let's hope that it doesn't happen, okay? Let's hope that it doesn't happen. November 10th, Scott Briller points out, was the first date last year where Central Park in New York City dropped below 32. It actually got down to 25. And that, as I remember, by the way, that came right after a very, very long extended summer pattern that lasted into the first 10 days of November. And that was the first shot across the bow with regards to the big change in the weather pattern that occurred that took us into the icebox late in November and through December and into the first part of January. I think that there's a chance that we could see the temperatures down closer to the freezing mark later this week. Maybe if it's going to happen, it would be Thursday morning and Friday morning with that big high to the north and that northerly flow coming down the Hudson Valley. So there's a chance that we might do it this week. After that, I'm not so sure. I don't think that we'll have air cold enough. But you know what? It's early in the game. A lot of that, by the way, is going to depend on the storm development for next weekend and how that impacts the atmosphere after the storms go by. So I guess I should say that if there's an opportunity that shows up during the first week of the month of November, it'll hinge on the last days of October and the first days of November, that week of October 29th. That's going to really hinge on the storm development in the east and how that impacts the overall atmosphere. Frost on Thursday for 5,000 subscribers with no videos. I'm kind of curious, where are you geographically? There's been this season, by the way, has produced some early frosts and freezes. It hasn't happened this early in quite some time, because we've had a tendency these last number of years to have these sort of extended warm periods going into the middle and latter part of October, so that the first frosts and freezes have been kind of pushed back into the month of November. Not so this year, and that's a good thing, because it's gotten rid of all the mosquitoes now finally, and the growing season, of course, is over with, and I got to remember to blow out my sprinklers. Green Fire 919, hello to you. Good to see you on, joining us late today. And one man's opinion, I saved green stamps as well as yellow stamps, if you remember them. And I guess I'll throw some in. If you remember the old A&P chain with the plaid stamps. I can remember my mother doing the plaid stamp books and then redeeming them. And that goes back into the 60s and 70s. But those are gone. There were the plaid stamps and the green stamps and whatever other ones that they had. And now, of course, the A&P chain is no longer with us either. If you, by the way, if you look on the internet, if you Google that, you can. They have the old images and the old signs, and some of the stores that the pictures of the old of A&Ps going back into the 20s and 30s, because that chain began back in 1859. So it had a very, very long history. Now, of course, we're watching Sears bite the dust too. So that one is going. Patrick McGill is on tonight. Nice to see you there. Hope everything is well. And I guess at this point, the Alley's Nick K. Does Grand Union still exist up north? I think there might be one or two Alley's Nick K. There used to be one in the neighborhood I grew up in the Bronx, but I think that's gone now. So there may not be very many of them yet. And A&P, as one man's opinion, is now ShopRite, and those are, I think they bought some of the stores, and um, some of the other chains, they kind of picked through the pile, and took stores that were an advantage to them. Timothy says he's verifying the fact, and now we're settling to talk about supermarkets here. And James, NASCAR fan, nice to see you on, James. Pathmark's long gone because A&P owned Pathmark. Delvin, your work has been stressful for the last few weeks. Shifts have to be rotated constantly. Yeah, that's not fun when shifts are being rotated around and it takes you out of your regular element. Your body clock rejects all that, and I totally understand it. Okay, so let's leave it here at this juncture. Thanks very much for those of you who've been on here and sat through the 47-minute live stream that we've had so far. Let me just again do a shameless self-promotion for those of you who are into whether I think you would like the Patreon platform and do consider joining it. It is a subscription platform. It starts at just $2 a month. If you're somebody that might be looking for more direct assistance, maybe some professional assistance, there are some higher tiers that you can consider. Or, of course, if you're feeling a little more generous, I won't object. But I'm putting the link up to Patreon here on the chat. And also, one other way that you could support my channel that really doesn't cost you anything is if you shop on Amazon.com. Because I am a member of Amazon's affiliate program, which is a program that allows channels like mine to earn fees from Amazon, not from you, but from Amazon when you go shopping on there. If you do it through the Amazon link that I'm going to put up. So if you do that, you can make your Amazon purchases, and Amazon will throw me back some coin, and that works for me because then I get to maybe pick up a couple of extra cigars along the way, or maybe buy myself some lunch when I'm at work during the late afternoon and evening. And it's another great, easy way to support my channel. So thank you for those of you that have used the Amazon link. So as far as the schedule is concerned, probably going to do a Patreon, private Patreon live stream tomorrow morning at about 9:30. Those have seemed to work pretty well on a Sunday morning, so we can all sit down with a cup of coffee um, for a Sunday morning and go through what the overnight weather models have done. I'm sorry, let me just type this up on the chat here. Okay, and that'll be at 9:30, and I'll probably do a live stream tomorrow night here on YouTube. We'll do a regular live stream, and then it's back to Monday through Friday. So I will be we'll do our Monday live stream either at 6 o'clock Eastern time or 7 o'clock Eastern time. I'm going to probably push it back to 7 o'clock, if only because this way we'll have the new GFS run to look at, and it'll be in its entirety so that when we come up at 7 o'clock, it's all done, and I won't be having to shift back and forth to check it out. And of course, the Joe and Joe Weather Show will resume on Facebook on Monday, and that's on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Chaffee, and that's at 9:15. Thanks for being here tonight. Those of you who are new, thank you for being here and welcome. And for participating in the chat, I saw some of you did. Please remember, if you could, hit the subscribe button to my YouTube channel so that you can get notified that these live streams are going on and become part of our regular audience. All right, folks, have a great evening. We'll see you tomorrow.